that orchid. Yeah.
Thank you.
The other day, you know what's in there, right?
Huh? Yeah.
Okay. You're spicing it up today. Something going on? Sarah?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were looking there.
No.
No, not really.
Got something special?
I have to give a speech in my next class.
I like that. What's the speech on?
Myself.
I like that idea. I see what you're doing. Yeah, that's good. So what are you going to say about yourself?
I talked about my education and why I want to be a nurse and my daughter.
I think we'll be a good one.
Hopefully.
All right, so last time we said that tissues possess not only vascular capillaries, but also lymphatic capillaries. We said one of the roles of those lymphatic capillaries was to drain interstitial fluid and return it back to the bloodstream. Now, just like the vascular system, the lymphatic vascular system has a series of different types of vessels. It starts with lymphatic capillaries. And they're going to drain into progressively larger vessels. The next in sequence would be what are called afferent lymphatic vessels. When we use the word afferent, it means that they're traveling towards something. These afferent lymphatic vessels are going to be drained by regional lymph nodes. So these vessels are going to carry that interstitial fluid, which is now called lymph. Okay. It's going to carry it through the passageways within lymph nodes, so that the lymph nodes can filter the lymph. So that if that lymph contains any foreign material or bacteria, okay, it will be recognized and trapped and will develop an immune response to it. As that lymph leaves the lymph node, it enters into an efferent lymphatic vessel. Okay. And the efferent lymphatic vessels then anastomose to form one of about 9 different lymphatic trunks. And then these lymphatic trunks are going to drain into one of 2 lymphatic ducts. Which in turn drain into either the right or left subclavian vein. So this is the sequence through which lymph passes in returning to the bloodstream. Again, when I say lymph, I mean that interstitial fluid which is now entered into the lymphatic vessels. Once the interstitial fluid does that, it's called lymph. Okay. Now, when we talk about the lymphatic system, okay, we're talking about this group of vessels, this network of vessels, which transport back to the blood any fluids that have escaped, that have extravasated at the capillary beds. But in addition to this system of vessels, the lymphatic system also includes tissues and organs which house phagocytic cells, cells that are capable of phagocytosis, as well as lymphocytes and other immune cells that play a role in our body's defense. So, for example, these lymph nodes would be part of this category, lymphatic tissues and organs. Okay? Remember, the lymph is percolating through those lymph nodes, and if it contains any foreign material, it's going to be recognized. It will be phagocytosed and presented to other cells for our immune system to generate a response. Okay? And as we'll see, there are other lymphatic organs other than lymph nodes. Okie doke. This is a slide that demonstrates the presence of these blind-ended lymphatic capillaries within tissues. We said last class that interstitial fluid is formed here in capillary beds, and most of that interstitial fluid is picked up by these lymphatic capillaries. If we were to take a big old microscope and look at one of these lymphatic capillaries, it would look like this. It would be lined by a simple squamous epithelium, with a major difference from the simple squamous epithelium of vascular capillaries. And that difference is that the neighboring cells overlap like this. Secondly, these epithelial cells are anchored to the surrounding tissue by these anchoring filaments. This particular architecture or anatomy allows the epithelium to serve as a type of valve. It allows fluid to come in, but once fluid accumulates inside of this lymphatic capillary, it creates pressure that closes the valve. So fluid and particulate matter or bacteria can enter, but it can't leave. Another major difference is that the size of the opening here through this valve-like structure is much larger than any opening in a vascular capillary. So that molecules or bacteria, small organisms that otherwise would not be able to fit into a vascular capillary can be picked up by the lymphatic system. And of course, they'd be carried here from these lymphatic capillaries to afferent vessels, where they'd be carried to regional lymph nodes and would generate a response. All right, this is kind of the anatomy of the lymphatic vessels. I'm going to point out the major trunks as we're going through the anatomy. If this picture were to include this person's feet, okay, then it would include lymphatic capillaries. The idea is that the capillaries are draining into these vessels, which are afferent lymphatic vessels, which are traveling back up toward the trunk. Now notice at the level of the groin, you have inguinal lymph nodes that sit within the pathway of those afferent lymphatic vessels. Okay. So that lymph being carried by those afferent vessels is going to percolate through the lymph nodes. Okay. And then as it leaves the lymph nodes, it will enter into efferent lymphatic vessels. These efferent lymphatic vessels join together to form trunks. Okay. For instance, the trunk that drains the right lower extremity is called the right lumbar trunk. The trunk that drains the left lower extremity is called the left lumbar trunk. There's even a trunk that drains the intestines. It travels through the mesentery. That would be called the intestinal trunk. If we look upstairs, the trunk that drains the right and left upper extremities is called the subclavian trunk, right and left. The trunk that drains the head and neck on either side is called the jugular trunk. And then finally, the trunk that drains the chest and lungs. These are called bronchomediastinal trunks. So these trunks are draining efferent lymphatic vessels. Okay. Now, if we look at our schematic here, these trunks are going to drain into one of two lymphatic ducts. Let's start with the larger of the two. When the right and the left lumbar trunk joins the intestinal trunk, they form a large sac-like structure called the cisterna chyli. Again, when the right and left lumbar trunk join the intestinal trunk, they form a large sac-like structure called the cisterna chyli. The cisterna chyli represents the origin, the earliest portion of the left lymphatic duct. It's the start of the left lymphatic duct. Now, most people don't call it the left lymphatic duct, they call it the thoracic duct. So be aware of that. So lymph is going to move upward through the thoracic duct from the cisterna chyli. It's going to move up into the thorax, and eventually it's going to empty into the left subclavian vein. But before emptying into the left subclavian vein, it's going to pick up lymph from the left bronchomediastinal trunk, the left subclavian trunk, and the left jugular trunk. Again, the thoracic duct starts at the cisterna chyli. It moves up the thorax to empty into the left subclavian vein, but before it does so, it picks up lymph flow from the jugular trunk, the bronchomediastinal trunk, and the subclavian trunk on the left side. So what you can gather from that explanation is that that thoracic duct, or that left lymphatic duct, is providing lymph drainage to most of the body. Okay? It's providing lymph drainage to all of the body below the diaphragm. The intestines, both lower extremities. It's providing lymph drainage to the left side of the thorax, and the left upper extremity, and left head and neck. Okay. The right lymphatic duct is much smaller. It's formed by the confluence, or the anastomosis, of the right bronchomediastinal, right jugular, and right subclavian trunks. Okay. It's going to empty into the right subclavian vein. So it's draining the territory of the right chest, right upper extremity, right head and neck. Not near the distribution as the thoracic duct. What I'm showing you on this slide here is the cisterna chyli, which represents the start of the thoracic duct. And we can kind of follow it up the thoracic cavity here, and notice it's picking up flow from all of those other trunks before it joins the left subclavian vein. Here we see the right lymphatic duct emptying into the right subclavian vein. This next image really shows the same thing in this patient, but I like it because of this image in the northeast corner. In green here is the drainage of the thoracic duct. In beige here is the drainage of the right lymphatic duct. You see the difference? Draw a little picture. They say a picture is worth a million words, right? Okay, so remember how when you were a kid, your mama said Don't go outside without your shoes. There were some days where you ignored your mom or your dad, and you went out there barefoot, right? And if you weren't careful, this has happened to me in the past, you could step on a nail. Okay, you hate when that happens. So when you step on that nail, like this, in most cases, that nail is not sterile. Okay? It's carrying with it bacteria from the outside world. Little bitty things. You know, take a microscope, you've seen how small bacteria are under a microscope. Okay. So those bacteria are then going to place you at risk for developing an infection. Why? Because they like to propagate. You know, if you ever, inoculate a broth or a culture plate in microlab, you can see that within 24 hours, those bacteria can proliferate to a tremendous extent. Well, one thing that these lymphatic capillaries will do is they'll pick up some of those bacteria, and they'll eventually drain into afferent lymphatic vessels. Okay, and these afferent lymphatic vessels, let's suppose they're being filtered by superficial inguinal lymph nodes. Okay. And of course, leaving those lymph nodes would be efferent lymph nodes like this. Well, as those bacteria are carried up to the regional lymph nodes like this, the bacteria will be recognized and filtered out of the lymph. Okay? Macrophages will engulf those bacteria and process them and present little antigenic fragments of those bacteria to other cells of our immune system, particularly lymphocytes. And, of course, lymphocytes love themselves some bacteria. So when they get stimulated by those antigens, those foreign particles, those lymphocytes begin to proliferate. And so as the lymphocytes within the lymph node proliferate,